Over the past 4 years, remote work reshaped where Americans chose to live. Suburban neighborhoods that once served as quiet bedroom communities transformed into bustling hubs of work-from-home professionals. Property values skyrocketed. Local schools overflowed with new families. Coffee shops that used to close by 3 in the afternoon suddenly stayed packed until evening. These weren't just places people slept anymore. They became where people lived, worked, and built entire routines around never commuting again. But as we roll into the second half of 2025, that foundation is cracking. Major corporations are issuing return-to-office mandates with teeth behind them. Tech giants, financial institutions, and consulting firms that once championed flexibility are now demanding employees show up in person 4, even 5 days a week. And the suburbs that bloomed during the remote work explosion are starting to wilt under the pressure. Home values are sliding. Retail vacancies are climbing. The families who moved out to these areas specifically for space and affordability are now facing brutal commutes or the prospect of uprooting their lives all over again. If you want to stay ahead of the massive shifts redefining American housing and lifestyle, hit that subscribe button right now, because what's unfolding in these 20 suburbs is a warning about what happens when an entire way of life reverses course overnight. Let's get into it. Number 20, Buda, Texas. Buda sits just south of Austin, a small town that spent decades in obscurity before the pandemic turned it into a relocation hotspot. Between 2020 and 2023, the population surged by nearly 40%. Families from California and the Northeast poured in, lured by new construction, low taxes, and the promise of remote work, making distance irrelevant. Developers couldn't build fast enough. Entire subdivisions appeared in former ranch land. Schools expanded. Box stores followed. Number 19, Hampstead, Maryland. Hampstead never asked to become a commuter suburb. Tucked into rolling hills northwest of Baltimore, it was a farming community that valued quiet over growth. But during the pandemic, that quiet became its biggest selling point. Remote workers from Baltimore and Washington, D.C. started moving in, drawn by affordable homes, land, and a pace of life that felt almost therapeutic compared to urban chaos. Between 2020 and 2024, home prices jumped more than 30%. Builders broke ground on new developments. The local government scrambled to keep up with demand for services. For a moment, Hampstead seemed poised to shed its small-town identity and join the ranks of thriving suburban markets. That moment has passed. In 2025, the return-to-office mandates hitting D.C. and Baltimore have left Hampstead dangerously exposed. Number 18, Harriman, Utah. Harriman exploded during the remote work era. Positioned on the southwestern edge of the Salt Lake Valley, it went from a sleepy suburb of under 20,000 people to one of the fastest-growing cities in the entire country. Tech workers fleeing California's cost of living flooded in. Families seeking space and mountain views followed. Developers responded by building thousands of homes almost overnight, transforming farmland into sprawling master-planned communities. For a while, Harriman looked unstoppable, but by 2025, the cracks are showing. Home prices have slipped nearly 10% from their 2023 peak, and inventory is stacking up faster than buyers can absorb it. The issue isn't complicated. Most of the jobs that sustained Harriman's growth were based in Salt Lake City, or even further north in places like Lehigh and Draper. When remote work was the norm, that distance didn't matter. But now, with companies demanding in-office attendance, that commute has become a serious problem. During rush hour, getting from Harriman to downtown Salt Lake can take well over an hour. Drive to Lehigh's Silicon Slopes, and you're looking at even longer in stop-and-go traffic. Workers who thought they'd escape the grind are now spending 10-plus hours a week in their cars, and the lifestyle that made Harriman attractive has evaporated. Families are reconsidering. Some are moving closer to work. Others are leaving Utah altogether, frustrated by a market that promised freedom and delivered gridlock. Number 17, Woodstock, Georgia. Woodstock carved out a reputation as one of Metro Atlanta's most desirable suburbs. Historic downtown charm, solid schools, and just far enough from the city to feel peaceful but close enough to stay connected. During the remote work boom, it became a magnet for young families and professionals who wanted the best of both worlds. Home prices surged. New developments popped up in every direction. Local businesses thrived. For a stretch, Woodstock genuinely felt like it had cracked the code. But in 2025, that balance has tipped. Number 16. Lake Elmo, Minnesota. Lake Elmo is one of those places most Americans have never heard of. But during the pandemic, it became a quiet refuge for Minneapolis and St. Paul professionals. Nestled in the eastern suburbs, it offered sprawling lots, lakes, trails, and the kind of space that felt like a luxury when work from home made office location irrelevant. Between 2020 and 2023, home prices climbed steadily. Families from the Twin Cities moved in, trading cramped urban living for acreage and privacy. Developers started eyeing the area for new projects. Lake Elmo seemed poised for a sustained run. But 2025 has brought that run to an abrupt halt. Home prices have dipped nearly 9%, and the number of active listings has more than doubled. The problem is isolation. Number 15. Fuquay-Varina, North Carolina. Fuquay-Varina, a double-barreled name for a town that became a pandemic darling. Located south of Raleigh, it was the kind of place people passed through but rarely stopped in. Then remote work changed everything. Suddenly, proximity to Research Triangle Park didn't matter as much. Families wanted affordability, space, and a small-town feel, and Fuquay-Varina had all three. Between 2020 and 2024, the population grew by more than 25%. New neighborhoods sprouted across former farmland. Schools expanded. Traffic increased. For a moment, Fuquay-Varina was living the dream. But the dream is fading fast. In 2025, home prices have dropped about 8%, and inventory is climbing. The issue is simple geography. Fuquay-Varina is far enough from Raleigh and Durham that the commute, manageable once or twice a week, has become unbearable as a daily grind. We're talking 30 to 45 minutes each way under good conditions, and Research Triangle traffic is rarely good. Workers who moved here for the lifestyle are now spending hours each week behind the wheel, and the calculus has shifted. The space and savings that made Fuquay-Varina attractive don't compensate for lost time and rising gas costs. Families are reconsidering. Some are moving back toward Raleigh or Durham. Others are staying put but regretting the decision, trapped by a market that's no longer supporting the prices they paid. New construction has slowed. Builders who had aggressive expansion plans are now pulling back, watching as existing inventory sits unsold. Retail and dining establishments that opened during the boom are feeling the pinch. A brewery that was supposed to anchor a new development is struggling to draw crowds. A boutique grocery store closed after less than 2 years. The charm of small-town life is still there, but fewer people are willing to trade convenience for it. Fuquay-Varina isn't collapsing in a traditional sense. It's not abandoned or blighted. But the trajectory has shifted from rapid growth to stagnation, and the optimism that defined the past few years has been replaced by a cautious uncertainty. In 2025, Fuquay-Varina is learning that small-town charm only goes so far when your job is 30 miles away and your boss wants you at a desk 5 days a week. Number 14. Apex, North Carolina. Apex, another Raleigh suburb, earned the nickname Peak of Good Living. And for a while, it seemed to live up to the hype. Great schools, a revitalized downtown, and a location close enough to Research Triangle Park to stay connected made it a favorite for families. During the remote work boom, Apex went into overdrive. Home prices soared. New developments filled every available plot. The town became a symbol of pandemic-era suburban success. But in 2025, that success is unraveling. Home values have slipped nearly 10%, and the number of homes sitting on the market has surged. The problem is the same one plaguing towns across the region. Return-to-office mandates are forcing workers back into Raleigh, Durham, and RTP, and the commute from Apex, once a minor inconvenience, has become a major burden. During rush hour, getting into downtown Raleigh or Durham can take 45 minutes or more, and the frustration is mounting. Families who moved to Apex for quality of life are now sacrificing that quality to traffic and stress. Some are moving closer to work. Others are holding on, hoping the market rebounds, but confidence is shaky. New construction projects that were greenlit during the height of optimism are now struggling to find buyers. Builders are offering incentives, cutting prices, and in some cases, walking away from projects altogether. Retail spaces that opened to serve the influx of new residents are seeing slower traffic. A high-end fitness center that was supposed to be a cornerstone of a new development is operating at half capacity. Restaurants that thrived on the newcomer wave are scaling back hours. Apex still has its charm. The downtown area still draws visitors. The schools are still strong. But the foundation that made Apex the peak has weakened. The assumption that distance didn't matter has been proven wrong, and the market is adjusting accordingly. In 2025, Apex is a cautionary tale about building growth on a temporary trend. The peak has passed, and the descent, while not catastrophic, is unmistakable. Number 13, Melissa, Texas. Melissa, a tiny town north of Dallas, became one of the fastest-growing places in America during the pandemic. With a population that exploded from under 5,000 to over 20,000 in just a few years, Melissa was the definition of a boomtown. Developers rushed in. Families from California, the Midwest, and even other parts of Texas followed. The appeal was clear: new homes, low taxes, and the freedom to work from anywhere. But in 2025, that freedom has been stripped away, and Melissa is paying the price. Home prices have fallen roughly 12% from their peak, one of the steepest drops in the Dallas metro area. The reason is distance. Melissa is nearly 40 miles north of downtown Dallas. During rush hour, that commute can stretch to well over an hour, sometimes closer to 90 minutes if traffic is particularly bad. Workers who moved here thinking they'd never see an office again are now facing that brutal drive 5 days a week. And the strain is showing. Families are leaving. Some are selling at a loss just to escape the commute. Others are stuck, unable to move because their home values have cratered. New construction, which was everywhere just 2 years ago, has ground to a halt. Builders who bet big on Melissa are now sitting on unsold inventory, cutting prices, and offering incentives that would have been unthinkable during the boom. The infrastructure that was supposed to support all this growth, schools, roads, retail, is still catching up, and in some cases, it's not catching up at all. A planned shopping center was delayed indefinitely. A new school that was supposed to open this fall is behind schedule. The sense of a community coming together has been replaced by a sense of chaos, of a place that grew too fast and is now collapsing under its own weight. Local businesses are struggling too. A coffee shop that opened in 2022 closed last month. A family restaurant is hanging on by a thread. The optimism that drew people to Melissa has evaporated, replaced by frustration and regret. Melissa isn't a ghost town, but it's a town in retreat, and the speed of that retreat is almost as dramatic as the speed of its rise. In 2025, Melissa is a stark reminder that growth without infrastructure, without jobs, without a real foundation, is just a bubble waiting to burst. Number 12. Anna, Texas. Anna sits just east of Melissa, and its story is almost identical. Another tiny Texas town that saw explosive growth during the remote work era. Anna went from a population of under 2,000 to over 20,000 in less than 5 years. It was a developer's dream and a remote worker's paradise, until it wasn't. By 2025, home prices in Anna have dropped nearly 13%, and the market has frozen. Listings are sitting for months. Builders are slashing prices. Families are trapped in homes they can't sell and commutes they can't sustain. The distance to Dallas is punishing, often over an hour each way, and with return-to-office mandates in full effect, that commute has become the defining feature of life in Anna. The infrastructure promised to residents hasn't materialized. Roads are congested. Schools are overcrowded. Retail options are limited. The town that was supposed to be a fresh start has become a daily grind, and people are bailing. Some are moving closer to Dallas. Others are leaving Texas altogether. The construction boom that defined Anna's rise has collapsed. Empty lots that were supposed to be filled with new homes are now just empty lots. Spec homes that were supposed to sell in days are sitting vacant. Builders who rode the wave up are now drowning in debt, unable to move inventory and unable to refinance. Local businesses that opened to serve the influx are struggling. A gym that opened in 2023 is barely hanging on. A daycare center closed after just 1 year. The vision of a thriving suburban community has been replaced by the reality of a overbuilt, undersupported town in decline. Anna's collapse is fast and unforgiving, a textbook case of what happens when growth is built entirely on a temporary trend. In 2025, Anna is a warning, and the people who bought into the dream are the ones paying for it. Number 11. Casa Grande, Arizona. Casa Grande, located halfway between Phoenix and Tucson, spent decades as a quiet stopover town. Then the pandemic hit, and suddenly its location became an asset. Remote workers from both metro areas moved in, drawn by cheap land and new construction. Between 2020 and 2024, the population surged. Developers built thousands of homes. Retail followed. For a brief moment, Casa Grande felt like it was finally on the map. But in 2025, that moment is over. Home prices have dropped about 11%, and the market is littered with for sale signs that aren't coming down. The problem is isolation. Casa Grande is too far from both Phoenix and Tucson to make daily commuting realistic. We're talking an hour plus each way, and Arizona heat makes that drive even more miserable. Workers who moved here thinking distance didn't matter are now stuck in a place that offers little in terms of jobs, culture, or amenities. Families are leaving. Homes are sitting empty. New developments that were supposed to define Casa Grande's future are stalled, half-finished, or abandoned altogether. The retail spaces that opened during the boom are struggling to stay afloat. A shopping center that was supposed to anchor a new neighborhood is mostly vacant. Restaurants are closing. The infrastructure that was supposed to support growth never fully materialized. The optimism that briefly lifted Casa Grande has been replaced by a creeping sense of abandonment. In 2025, Casa Grande is collapsing not with a bang, but with a slow, painful fade-out. A reminder that proximity still matters, even in the age of remote work. Or at least, it mattered when remote work was still a thing. Number 10. Locust Grove, Georgia. Locust Grove is a small town south of Atlanta that became a surprising hotspot during the pandemic. With affordable homes and just enough distance from the city to feel peaceful, it attracted families looking for space without the urban headaches. Between 2020 and 2023, the population grew steadily. New subdivisions appeared, schools filled up. For a while, Locust Grove seemed to be riding the same wave as every other successful exurb. But by 2025, that wave has crashed. Home prices have fallen roughly 9%, and inventory is stacking up. The issue is the commute. Locust Grove is nearly 40 miles south of Atlanta, and during rush hour, getting into the city can take well over an hour. Workers who moved here thinking they'd work from home indefinitely are now facing that commute daily, and the lifestyle they bought into has turned into a grind. Some families are moving back closer to Atlanta. Others are stuck, unable to sell without taking a significant loss. New construction has stalled. Builders who were aggressively expanding are now pulling back, watching as existing homes sit unsold. Retail businesses that opened to serve the newcomer wave are struggling. A boutique coffee shop closed after barely a year. A new gym is offering deep discounts just to keep memberships from collapsing. The sense of growth and momentum that defined Locust Grove's pandemic era has evaporated. What's left is a town caught between its rural past and a suburban future that never fully arrived. In 2025, Locust Grove is learning that growth built on a temporary trend is inherently unstable, and when that trend reverses, the consequences are swift and unforgiving. Number 9. Calera, Alabama. Calera sits along Interstate 65, south of Birmingham, and during the remote work boom, it became a refuge for families seeking affordability and space. With new homes priced well below Birmingham's inner suburbs, Calera attracted a steady stream of buyers who no longer needed to live close to work. Between 2020 and 2024, the population grew significantly. New developments filled in around the interstate. Retail followed. For a moment, Calera looked poised for sustained growth, but 2025 has been brutal. Home prices have dropped nearly 10%, and the market has slowed to a crawl. The problem is straightforward. Calera is too far from Birmingham to make daily commuting realistic for most workers. We're talking 45 minutes to an hour each way, and with return-to-office mandates taking hold, that distance has become a deal-breaker. Families who moved to Calera for the lifestyle are now facing the reality of lost time and mounting stress. Some are moving back toward Birmingham. Others are staying put, trapped by a market that won't support the prices they paid. New construction has slowed dramatically. Builders who were racing to meet demand are now sitting on unsold homes, cutting prices and hoping to break even. Retail businesses that opened during the boom are seeing foot traffic decline. A home goods store that was supposed to anchor a new shopping center is struggling. Restaurants are cutting hours. The optimism that drove Calera's growth has been replaced by uncertainty and frustration. Calera isn't collapsing in a dramatic sense, but it's deflating, slowly losing the momentum that briefly made it relevant. In 2025, Calera is a reminder that even modest growth, when built on shaky assumptions, can unravel quickly. Number 8. Daphne, Alabama. Daphne, located on the eastern shore of Mobile Bay, became a pandemic darling thanks to its coastal charm and relative affordability. Remote workers from across the South moved in, drawn by waterfront views and a slower pace of life. Between 2020 and 2023, home prices surged. Number 7. Pahrump, Nevada. Pahrump, located about an hour west of Las Vegas, was never anyone's first choice. But during the pandemic, it became a last resort for remote workers priced out of Vegas and looking for cheap housing. With home prices a fraction of what they were in the city, Pahrump saw a surge of interest. Number 6. Spring Hill, Tennessee. Spring Hill, located south of Nashville, was one of the pandemic era's biggest winners. With affordable homes, new construction, and proximity to one of the hottest cities in America, Spring Hill seemed like a sure bet. Between 2020 and 2024, the population exploded. Developments filled every available space. Schools expanded. Retail followed. Spring Hill was living the dream. But by 2025, the dream is fading. Home prices have dropped nearly 12%, and inventory is piling up. The issue is the commute. Spring Hill is 35 miles south of Nashville, and during rush hour, that drive can take well over an hour. Workers who moved here thinking they'd work from home are now facing that commute daily, and the lifestyle they bought into has turned into a nightmare. Families are leaving. Homes are sitting unsold. Builders are slashing prices. Retail businesses are struggling. The momentum that made Spring Hill one of the fastest-growing towns in America has evaporated, replaced by frustration and regret. In 2025, Spring Hill is collapsing under the weight of its own success, a victim of growth that was built entirely on a trend that didn't last. Number 5. Hendersonville, Tennessee. Hendersonville, just north of Nashville, experienced a similar boom. With lakefront properties and a small-town feel, it attracted families looking for space and charm. Between 2020 and 2023, home prices surged. Number 4. Pflugerville, Texas. Pflugerville rode Austin's tech boom harder than almost any suburb. During the pandemic, remote workers poured in, chasing cheaper homes while keeping Austin's salaries. New subdivisions popped up seemingly overnight. Traffic worsened, but no one cared. No one was commuting. For a while, Pflugerville felt inevitable. But in 2025, the equation has flipped. Home prices are down around 11% from their peak, and listings are stacking up. Austin employers are calling workers back, and Pflugerville's location, far north with limited transit options, has become a liability. Commutes stretch past an hour. Infrastructure never caught up with growth. Schools are overcrowded. Roads are clogged. The affordability that once justified the sacrifice is gone. Builders are offering incentives. Investors are backing out. Pflugerville isn't collapsing because Austin is failing. It's collapsing because living close enough no longer is. Number 3. Queen Creek, Arizona. Queen Creek, on the far edge of the Phoenix metro, exploded during the remote work era. Big houses, new schools, master-planned communities as far as the eye could see. Families moved in believing Phoenix jobs would always be flexible. But in 2025, Phoenix traffic is brutal again, and Queen Creek sits more than 40 miles from many employment centers. Home prices are down roughly 13%, and inventory is surging. The desert sprawl that once felt like freedom now feels isolating. Summer heat, long drives, and rising costs are pushing people back toward the city, or out of Arizona entirely. Retail that followed the boom is struggling. Construction has slowed. Queen Creek is discovering that growth without proximity is fragile, and once demand fades, distance becomes unforgiving. Number 2, Leander, Texas. Leander was supposed to be Austin's future, one of the fastest growing cities in the country, fueled by remote workers and optimistic projections. New homes stretched endlessly along Highway 183. For years, prices only went one direction, up. But by 2025, Leander is stalling. Home values are down nearly 14%, and builders are sitting on unsold inventory. Austin's job market remains strong, but flexibility is gone. The commute from Leander can take 90 minutes on a bad day, and those days are becoming normal. What once felt like a smart long-term bet now feels like a trap. Families are cutting losses. Investors are dumping properties. Leander didn't fail because it grew too fast. It failed because it grew for the wrong reason. Number 1, Surprise, Arizona. Surprise is the clearest warning sign of all. Located on the far western edge of the Phoenix metro, it became a magnet for remote workers during the pandemic. Massive homes, low prices, endless new construction. Population soared. Builders couldn't keep up. For a brief moment, Surprise felt unstoppable. But in 2025, the collapse is undeniable. Home prices have fallen more than 16% from their peak. Inventory is overwhelming. Commutes into Phoenix can exceed 2 hours round trip, and hybrid work has turned into full return to office. There are no major job centers nearby, no cultural anchors, no transit lifeline. People are leaving faster than they arrived. Entire neighborhoods sit quiet. Builders are walking away from projects mid-development. Surprise was built almost entirely on the assumption that location no longer mattered. In 2026, that assumption is being erased. These suburbs weren't bad places. They just bet everything on a trend that didn't last. Remote work didn't disappear, but it stopped being universal. And when flexibility faded, distance became deadly. In 2026, these towns are learning a hard truth. Housing markets don't collapse overnight. They unravel slowly, one commute, one price cut, one empty home at a time.